The best way to learn a language? Immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards for you this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. For instance, I've been using Babbel's convenient courses to help me learn basic conversational skills in German while I'm getting ready for a little trip I'm planning. It's not a language I'd ever studied before, but I find the lessons really easy and kind of like hand-holding me through learning a completely new language to me. And it's reassuring to know that with the help of Babbel, I'll be able to greet people, order food, and ask for directions without having to consult language apps while I'm in Deutschland. I'm still learning. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold. Plus, all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/vulgar. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/vulgar, spelled BABBEL.com/vulgar. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hello, I'm Alison Larkin, writer, comedian, narrator, and host of the Jane Austen podcast. Join me as we embark on a journey through Austen's timeless stories, starting with Pride and Prejudice. The Jane Austen podcast with Alison Larkin is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hi everyone, before we get started, I just wanted to tell you about a show that I think you'll enjoy. It's called Play On Podcasts, epic audio adventures that reimagine Shakespeare's timeless tales featuring original music composition and the voices of award-winning actors. Each episode explores plays from Macbeth to A Midsummer Night's Dream in a way you can actually understand, created specifically for the podcast form by some of America's most exciting playwrights, directors, and composers, and performed by Stage and Screen's best. Look out for their new series, Measure for Measure, and hear Shakespeare like you've never before. Subscribe to Play On Podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. Hello and welcome to Vulgar History, a feminist women's history comedy podcast. My name is Anne Foster, and this is the Internationale season. Still continuing, it's a continuing adventures of Tits sans frontières, Vulgar History Internationale. And thus far this season, more or less, I've been doing the stories in chronological order. And that's kind of why we got stuck in like 1600s Europe for a while, because I kept finding people who were friends with other people in that era. Anyway, we've been in the 19th century, solidly here for a while, and we are going to get back to that. But today we're going to pop back, like way back. Like this is the oldest person I've ever researched for this podcast or for anything. And why are we going all the way back? It's because, so I mentioned a couple weeks ago, towards the end of the episode, I don't know if you've heard that episode yet. Maybe this is your first episode. Welcome. But I wanted to mention in that episode about what's going on these days in Iran. And that got me looking at the history of Iran and wondering if there's someone that we could talk about from that region. Actually, pause. If you haven't heard what I said in the other episode, I just wanted to, again, acknowledge the incredible bravery of the people of Iran who, since September 17th, people have been demonstrating there throughout Iran following the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. Mahsa was arrested by Iran's morality police, allegedly for not wearing her hijab properly. 3 days after her arrest, Mahsa died in the hospital after falling into a coma. Police denied mistreating her and claimed she died of a heart attack. Protesters, with young people, especially young women, and including schoolgirls, are demanding an end to conservative laws, including the ones around dress codes, and those were all put in place in 1979. So there are members of the Tits Brigade. There are vulgar history listeners in Iran. I am messaging with one of them. And so I really want to let her and let everybody there know that I am thinking of them because this is a feminist revolution. And I am putting some links in the show notes of organizations if you want to help financially to support what's going on there. But you can also support what's going on there by paying attention, sharing information about the revolution, joining protests near you, organizing one if there's not one near you, and donating to Iran-focused human rights organizations. Anyway, I've been reading more about Iran to understand that part of the world and what's going on. And so I went back through my messages of suggestions, and I'm never going to stop wanting to hear from you, Tits Out Brigade, for suggestions of people from your country or from your background who you think would be good to talk about on this podcast. But I just searched to see, I'm pretty sure someone has mentioned someone from Iran. And in fact, someone had. So Tits Out Brigade member Layla, who is in the US, but her family is from Iran. And Layla suggests, what does she say? So this person, Artemisia of Caria. So Artemisia, as Layla says, she's technically Greek, but she did have a love affair with King Xerxes of Persia. So we'll talk about that. Did she? Maybe. But she for sure lived in that part of the world a very, very, very long time ago. And again, I can't emphasize how long ago this all happened. So the modern-day country of Iran, let's just start there. Where is this country located? If you look on a map if you know kind of between Asia and Africa, there's a big boot shape. I don't mean, Italy is always called the boot, but I always think of this as the boot shape / a Tetris shape. It's a peninsula, and on it, it's Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Iraq, Syria. These places are all on the boot. And then to the right, or I guess the east of the boot, it's the landmass that is Asia. And that's where Iran is. Iran is kind of right in between. It's what connects the boot to mainland Asia. So Iran it's connected to, it borders lots of places. It borders Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, and Iraq nowadays. So it does not come as a surprise that this is a place where civilization, as in people who decided to start a city or a country or a kingdom, decided to settle in there because it's located handily to a lot of bodies of water. There's good farming there and that sort of thing. So the people who were there, we generally call the Persian Empire. Technically, it was a series of historical empires that ruled over this region and beyond. So the first understanding of what we call the Persian Empire was formed under King Cyrus the Great. And we're just going to refer to this whole thing as the Persian Empire. Technically, it has a different name, the Achaemenid, or I listened to a pronunciation, Achaemenid dynasty, but we're just going to call it Persian Empire. That's just how it's generally known. Fun fact. So Iran, the modern day place where the country is, was always kind of the base of operations for this empire. And it is the oldest country in the world when you measure by when it established its own sovereignty. When people of a shared ethnic group were let's just be here and stay here and make this be our land. And then those same people, that ethnic group, continues to be one of the groups that lives in that land. So it was obviously not called Iran at that point, but it was founded something like 3200 BC. By contrast, that's about 100 years before Egypt, which is the second oldest civilization where people were there, and some of their descendants still live there now. So yeah, ethnically Persian people have lived in this place longer continuously than most other places on Earth. And I mean, I guess longer than Persian people lived in other places, but longer than anyone has lived in any same place. So it's quite remarkable. So the history is huge and long and big. And there are still Persian people or people of Persian ancestry living there now. That comprises about 1/3 of all the population because obviously, millennia have passed and there's been immigration and people have invaded and whatever. So there's all different people living there now, including descendants of the original Persian Empire. So, under Cyrus the Great, and I love the names. There's Cyrus. His son is Darius the Great. Like, these are very contemporary sounding names to me in the way of like, and other episodes, like, I don't know, Fredegund or Ethelfled. Like, that's how I think of like oldie time names, just sound sort of unfamiliar and strange to me. But Cyrus and Darius, like, well, those are just names that people would have now. Anyway, so under Cyrus the Great, the First Persian Empire became one of the largest empires in history, stretching from the Balkan Peninsula in the west to the Indus Valley in the east, so the Balkans to India. And in this era, so this empire founded by Cyrus the Great was a global hub of culture, religion, science, art, and technology for more than 200 years before it fell to the invading armies of Alexander the Great. I just realized I forgot to say what my sources are. And here's the thing about the woman we're talking about, Artemisia of Caria. There's not lots known about her. It's not a fact of like, no one's writing about her. It's like, no, there's like very little known. And so I found the information there is, with kind of repeated in several different places. So Wikipedia, Encyclopedia Britannica Online, History.com. I got some information, worldhistory.org, and then also information from a website or a magazine, Persian-esque magazine. I do also want to mention, if you want to learn more about the history of Persia, there's 2 podcasts I've played ads for before here that I recommend. There's the Persian History podcast and also So You Think You Can Rule Persia, are both talking about, they're never going to run out of stuff to say because it was a place for whatever, 3,200 years. So I'm telling you all this background stuff, similar to like the episode about Queen Min, where it's just so, I didn't know any of this stuff, and I assume many of you might not know a lot of this stuff. So to really set it in the place and time, but also especially because we know so little about this person, because this all happened incredibly long ago. Like, so Artemisia of Caria, she was active around 480 BC. So by contrast, that's like 400 years before Cleopatra, previously the most longest agoist person we've talked about on this podcast. So it's, you know, I'm grateful that we know anything about her, frankly. So let's see. So the Persians were the first people to establish regular routes of communication between 3 continents, Africa, Asia, and Europe. And that would be because, like how I described, like that they are between those. So they would be needing to do that as well. They had built many roads and developed the world's first postal service. So the religion that they practiced, I mean, nowadays, Iran and much of Persian history, you think about the Islamic religion, but that only became the dominant religion there after the Arab conquests of the 7th century. And we're looking at like 600 years before that. So the first Persian Empire was shaped by the religion of Zoroastrianism. So this was named after the Persian prophet Zoroaster, also known as Zarathustra. It's one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions and is still practiced today as a minority religion in parts of Iran and India. So Zoroaster likely lived sometime. This is like I'm not a student of ancient history, but when you see information, it's like he lived sometime between 1500 and 500 BC. It's like, we don't know. This was incredibly long ago. So, but Zoroaster, taught followers to worship one god instead of the many deities worshipped by other earlier groups in this area. So Cyrus and the Darius, all the kings of the Achaemenid dynasty, were Zoroastrian. And I think partially because of what this religion is all about, this shaped kind of what their culture was like. So by most accounts, Cyrus the Great was a tolerant ruler who allowed his subjects to speak their own languages and practice their own religions. And he didn't impose Zoroastrianism on the people of the conquered territories. And so this is also circa the time of like the Old Testament of the Bible. Things were happening. So some of what we know about this era comes from Hebrew scriptures, which praised Cyrus the Great for freeing the Jewish people of Babylon from captivity and allowing them to return to Jerusalem. So Cyrus, the founder of all of this, was around he died around 529 BC. Artemisia of Caria was active around 520. So remember, it's BC, so that's like 9 years later. So they overlapped by a bit, but Cyrus wasn't the king when she was doing what I'm about to tell you that she did. So by the time Artemisia of Caria was on the scene, the king of Persia was Xerxes I, who was the grandson of Cyrus. Xerxes, which is a fantastic name I think we need to bring back, is quasi well known because he was the one who invaded Greece to try and spread the Persian Empire into, again, it's not like the country of Greece we now know as Greece. It was kind of like islands in the Mediterranean that just like cumulatively, we're just going to kind of call Greece because it's kind of where Greek people were. So Xerxes' forces temporarily overran mainland Greece, but then they had some losses, and then the invasion ended up not working out entirely. And this is part of what Artemisia is going to do. So, like, hang on, we'll get to what she had to do with all of that. Xerxes is also known for successfully crushing revolts in Egypt and Babylon. He also has, this is another person of history who has a bad reputation, but I'd never heard of them. To me, he had no reputation, but he had a bad reputation. And this is because I mentioned that the Persian Empire shrank, became smaller after Alexander the Great conquered a bunch of those territories. And so Alexander the Great necessarily, like, in order to be like, I am Alexander the Great, so he had to say, like, all the people who are my enemies are like, they suck, they're terrible people. So he vilified Xerxes and said that he was no good. You know, even though Xerxes was also conquering places, it's like not in a cool way like Alexander was. So I believe Xerxes is also, I thought I'd written this down, but I didn't. Yeah, in the Bible. So there is the book of Esther. Ooh, is that in the Bible or is that in like I think it's in the Bible. I don't know. You know how there's like some stories that are in the Bible and then there's some stories that were in the Bible and then were taken out of the Bible. Anyway, it's a story in both Christianity and in Jewish traditions. The story of Esther. Esther was the wife of Xerxes. So in the Bible, he's called Ahasuerus, but I don't know why he's called that, but that's Xerxes the First. So like we're like overlapping with the Bible era. So just like oldie times. Anyway, so this all brings us to our heroine, finally, Artemisia of Caria. So Artemisia of Caria, and I need to make note, Artemisia the First of Caria, there's also an Artemisia the Second of Caria, who is like 100 years later. And when you're researching her, often people confuse the two, but I'm very specifically just talking about Artemisia the First of Caria. So she was the queen of Halicarnassus, which was a city in Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, more or less. So in this era, so because Cyrus had captured all kinds of places, so Artemisia was a Greek person, even though Greece like wasn't a country. But so the city had been held by the Greeks, but then it was captured, I think, during the time of Cyrus. And so now she was what's called a client queen. So like she was in charge of Halicarnassus, but officially like Xerxes was in charge of her and like all the other sort of like kings and queens of the places he had conquered, because he wasn't, you know, he didn't enforce his religion on people. He just kind of like let them be in charge, but he was officially their boss. So the city that she was the queen of was allied with Xerxes and the Persian Empire. So her father had been the governor of Halicarnassus. It's called the satrap. And or maybe he was the king. Again, this is not my area of expertise. I just know her father had been the satrap of Halicarnassus. Her mother was from the island of Crete. So presumably her husband had been the king. And then they had a son and her husband died. And as we've seen in so many stories, in so many eras, and it's kind of refreshing to see it again here in this like extraordinarily long ago story. So she had the son, but the son was young. So she took over as queen. Like, well, the boy was officially the king, but like she was the adult in charge. So it was likely one of those regency things where she was just in charge until he came of age sort of situation. So her name, Artemisia, sometimes she's called just Artemis, depends on your language, I guess. But Artemisia derives from Artemis, which is the name of the Greek god of chastity, hunting, and the moon, who is often depicted with her trusty bow and arrow and a short tunic to aid in running through the woods. This is, I'm pretty sure, the goddess. So in Roman mythology, she was known as Diana. And I think this is the goddess who Hortense Mancini was often painted to look like, because she also liked hunting. Anyway, so it's like a fitting name, because Artemisia I of Caria was a military leader. I'm going to guess she was also good at hunting. So I'm not entirely sure how culturally she would have been treated, because women in this era were treated differently in the Persian Empire, like in places where Persian people were living versus how they're treated in Greece. But where she was a client queen to the Persian Empire, I'm not sure how much culturally that would affect the way she's treated, because it was quite different. So, for instance, in the ancient Persian Empire, women were respected and in many cases seen as the equal of men. Women could own land, conduct business, they received equal pay, could travel freely on their own, and in the case of royal women, hold their own council meetings on policy. This is so, like, I used the word refreshing before, but this is just, like, really interesting to me, because as much as I've looked at all these stories, and I know that it's not just, like, women used to have no rights, and then, like, women get more and more rights as history goes on. No, it's like a push and pull. Like some eras women had more rights, some eras women had less rights. But this is like, oh, so in like the year 480 BC in ancient Persia, women received equal pay. And now we're in 2022. Just like, what the fuck is going on in the world? Anyway, that being said, by contrast, in ancient Greece at the same time, women had few rights in comparison to male citizens. That's the word citizens is looming large there, because I believe there was also enslaved people and none of them had any rights, but male citizens had rights. So in ancient Greece at the same time, women were unable to vote. They could not own land. They could not inherit. A woman's place was in the home and her purpose in life was the rearing of children. So it's, it's giving me Joseon Dynasty, Korea sort of vibes. We've looked at other cultures like that where women just like were not expected to do stuff, and it was just real confusing to people if they tried to. And I think this is part of why we know about Artemisia, because that's not what she did. She was very much an exception to that understanding. So I'm not sure, like she was the queen, but I think it was a thing where like she was a queen technically because her son was the king, and when he grew up, maybe she would stop being the queen. But also bear in mind everything we know about her, which again is like, it's an impressive amount considering how long ago this was. But she did not leave her memoirs. Like what we know about her was written by ancient Greek men who saw her life and actions through the lens of how their understanding of how women should behave. So it was really like, it was notable to them because that was not how she was behaving. And kind of like in the Rani Ditta episode where we only know about her because that one guy wrote about her. So here we only know about Artemisia I of Caria because one person wrote about her, and that was Herodotus. So he was an ancient Greek writer, also from Halicarnassus, same place she was from. So he was born at around the same time as Artemisia's most famous actions were occurring. So presumably, like, he was not a witness to this, being, an infant at the time. But he would have grown up hearing about her, and clearly that had an impact on him because he heard these stories and felt that it was important enough to write about her, even though he was from a culture, the ancient Greek culture, that did not think much of women. So, effectively taking away Herodotus, because this is what we know about her. So this is the story. On my notes, it's called The Story. Xerxes, the king of the Persian Empire, was setting out to conquer Greece and the Greek islands. And to do this, he needed buy-in from leaders like Artemisia and the other client kings. I think she was the only client queen at the time. The region that she was the queen of, she was the queen of Halicarnassus, but that included Greek cities along the coastline. And so for ship-based reasons, he had to get her help, he had to get her ships, he had to get her troops. So she was the only woman who led troops in this whole thing, because everyone else was being led by men. But not only did she offer her ships, but she personally commanded a contingent of 5 ships in the armada supporting this invasion of Greece. Only one other ruler contributed more ships than she did for this cause. And the ships she brought were really good ships. They had a really good, that's apparently the second best reputation in the whole fleet. So not quite the best, but getting there. So Xerxes was planning an attack in Salamis, is an ancient Greek city-state on the east coast of Cyprus. It's a place. Now, I am here to tell you that the word is written identically to the word salamis, like the lunch meat. And every time I see it, my brain thinks the Battle of Salamis. No. And I just picture people with like throwing salami at each other. No, it is not the Battle of Salamis. Disrespectful, Anne. The Battle of Salamis. But just please know, every time I see this word, I think salamis. So he was preparing, God, now I just want to say that, but I won't. Salamis. So he's planning just to invade in this crucial area. So he gathered all of his naval commanders together to just kind of like make a game plan, like football team getting ready to do their thing. Although he gathered them together, Xerxes was not there, but he put them, I don't know, all in a room together and sent his assistant, his helper, Mardonios, to kind of like follow up with them and see what did they think? What do the naval commanders think? And so Mardonios came in to be like, okay, naval commanders, do you think we should do this? Should we have a naval battle at Salamis? And all the men were like, yes, no, great plan, naval battle. Except Artemisia, who was like, no, don't think so. Here is the quote of what she said. Tell the king to spare his ships and not do a naval battle, because our enemies are much stronger than us in the sea, as men are to women. And why does he need to risk a naval battle? Athens, for which he did undertake this expedition, is his, and the rest of Greece too. No man can stand against him, and they who once resisted were destroyed. If Xerxes chose not to rush into a naval encounter, but instead kept his ships close to the shore and either stayed there or moved them towards the Peloponnese, victory would be his. The Greeks can't hold out against him for very long. They will leave for their cities because they don't have food in store on this island, as I have learned. And when our army will march against the Peloponnese, they who have come from there will become worried, and they will not stay here to defend Athens. But if he hurries to engage, I am afraid that the navy will be defeated, and the land forces will be weakened as well. In addition, he should also consider that he has certain untrustworthy allies, like the Egyptians, the Cyprians, the Cilicians, and the Pamphylians, who are completely useless. Now, this is obviously a translation from Herodotus writing this in presumably ancient Greek. But I do like, and this is also, a paraphrase of what he heard or imagined she would have said. Effectively, she's saying, this is a bad idea. Like, we're going to lose if we do a naval battle. But I like that it's translated as calling these other people completely useless, because that's a word I use. So, just useless, Anyway, she tells it like it is. She's just like, no, this is a bad idea, and here's why. But it seems like this was all just sort of a formality that he asked the military leaders if he should do it, because he was pretty much decided he was going to do it. And he didn't listen to her. And I mean, spoiler alert, she was right. But also, like, maybe Herodotus added this to the story that he wrote to make her sound like, a prophetess, to add some dramatic irony to the whole story. But maybe he did. And she also did that, because I'm going off of such little information, but I get the sense that she got it. She had good instincts, and she knew what was going on, and people should have listened to her. And that is the story of every woman in history we've ever talked about on this podcast. So Xerxes didn't listen to her, led his army in a sea battle, and, quote, led. What Xerxes did was he watched the battle from shore, from a big chair. There's a movie called, there's the movie 300 that's about that other early times battle. So there's a prequel to that came out that was not very successful called 300 Rise of an Empire. And Xerxes is in that movie. And Artemisia of Caria is played by Eva Green, which is apparently it's not a good movie. And her character, I'll talk about that later, how they kind of reimagined her character. But Eva Green is an actress who I feel like could really embody so many badass leaders, women from history. I could see Eva Green playing Fredegund. I could see Eva Green playing Brunhilde. I could see a movie that's Eva Green versus Eva Green as Fredegund and Brunhilde. Oh my gosh, my cat is attacking a plastic bag. Anyway, so Yes. So I guess famously in the movie, or very dramatically in the movie, they put him in some big chair. And I think they make him be like a god or something as well. Anyway, so Xerxes is watching the battle from shore. And he's watching it because he wanted to make sure his men and Artemisia fought bravely, because at a previous battle, he had not been there watching, and apparently his men had not been as brave as he wanted. So he felt like if they knew he was watching, they would act more brave or something. So he was there to see Artemisia's bravery. And what he saw, she proved herself to be so competent a naval commander that apparently, he said, among the people fighting, the men fought like women and the women fought like men. Which is like, this is a society with a real binary sort of thing. Wasn't that in Artemisia's, the quote I read from her before? Anyway, but this is, you know what? Ultimately, this is a compliment saying that she was braver and better than any of the men because she was great. So what did she do that he saw that was so great? So according to our pal Herodotus, the battle was not going well. I mean, also, please note, this battle was lost by the Persian side, but so the Persian fleet was not doing great. Apparently, an Athenian ship, so like on the Greek side, pursued Artemisia's ship, and she was not able to escape because there's other ships in front of her, like that were Persian ships. This is what we know she did. I know very little about Artemisia. No one knows anything about Artemisia except for this thing she did. So she's sort of trapped in. She's got like Persian ships ahead of her. Those are her allies. This Greek ship is chasing her, and she's like, what am I going to do? And what she did was she charged against one of the Persian ships manned by people of Kalindos, and on which, in fact, the king of the Kalindians was located. And I think that's one of the group of people who she said, no, that's not one of the groups she said was useless. So maybe they were okay. Anyway, so she just rammed her ship into their ship. Their ship sank. The king, so Herodotus, has a suggestion that maybe Artemisia had previously had a disagreement with this king. So maybe this was kind of like her way of getting out of this situation, but also of just like murdering her enemy, which is like, I have to say, a real Fredegan level tits out move. So anyway, she sank her own ally ship, which is like, wait, why is that good? Well, first of all, because ramming a ship into a ship is like a pretty cool thing to imagine happening. Yeah, so according to a later account, and again, this is just people trying to make sense of this. Apparently, because, you know, if Xerxes had seen Artemisia ramming her ship into their own ally's ship, why would he be like, that's great? But the thing is, he didn't know that's what happened. He just thought that she had taken down an enemy ship, I think. Anyway, so what she did was, allegedly, when she saw that she was going to be captured by the Greeks, she ordered the flag, the Persian flag, to be removed, taken down from her ship, so they could pretend like they weren't Persian, and then to attack the other ship. Anyway, so this all worked out because, so the captain of the Athenian ship, the ship that was attacking her, saw her like attack the Persian ship, and then he was like, oh wait, she's like switched teams, she's on our side now, so I'm not going to attack her, I'm going to attack somebody else. So this worked. It saved her, it saved her crew. The captain of the Athenian ship probably didn't know Artemisia was on the ship, because otherwise he would have been like, classic Artemisia, and he would have kept going after her, because orders had previous to this been given to the Athenian captains, and moreover, a prize was offered of 10,000 drachmas for the man who should take Artemisia alive, because they thought that it was the Greeks. Remember how much they hate women. They thought it was intolerable that a woman should make an expedition against Athens. So she was extra somebody who you wanted to capture, because just the fact that she was a woman, naval leader, was the Greeks. It was a real Herman my pills moment for them. So there's, I don't know. So it's like, did she just take down the flag and everyone's like, oh, guess that's not a Persian ship? Or she might have had both flags and she did a switcheroo depending on who she was fighting or something. Anyway, something with the flags. It worked. Apparently, when Xerxes saw her sink the ship, he said, "O Zeus, surely you have formed women out of man's materials and men out of women's." I think that's just the same, a different translation of the like, my men are women and my women are men. But basically, he's just like, hell yeah. So she fought so well at Salamis, even though they lost, that, oh no, this is just about there was the reward again, but just for scale. So the reward of 10,000 drachmas, just for the record, was, how much is that in today's money? I'm not sure, but that was about the weekly wage of 2,000 people. So a hell of a lot of money to capture her. The Greek, they just really wanted to capture her. They did not. And now we're just going to take a break for a word from our sponsors.
As a podcast network, our first priority has always been audio and the stories we're able to share with you. But at Realm, we also sell some pretty cool merch, and organizing that was made both possible and easy with Shopify. When you think about successful businesses like Aloe or Allbirds or Skims, an often overlooked secret is the business behind the business that makes selling and, for shoppers, buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. That's because nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret that's definitely worth talking about is that Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%. That's more happy customers and way more sales going. If you're hoping to grow your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm.
Ah, the web tore. Those that both creators and were created by the threads disentangle from the fringes to feast on the very thing that spawned them.
What's that, Timmy? This is how you deal with weird!
No! Do not harm my children!
Oh, you lost a feather. Can I keep it?
No, you can't force me to!
Do you know what lies within nothing?
Rocket is in trouble, Akasa! Can we turn on the windshield remotely?
No, she could lose her job as an Akasar.
I don't fear Vehar.
No, but you fear me. If you intend to trick me, I will not hesitate to sever the oath bond entirely.
Why didn't you help me? Coward! I don't have a parachute! I don't like free falling!
Counterbalance, a high fantasy audio drama. Season 2, coming 15th of October 2023. Learn more on trilunas.com.
People often look at me with confusion when I ask them what their only one in the room story is. They think it has to be like mine, where I went to a 600-person event and discovered that I was the only Black person there. I know. Horrifying, right? Hi, I'm Laura Cathcart-Robbins, and I am the host and creator of the podcast Only One in the Room. Every week, my co-host Scott Slaughter and I invite you to join us for an hour and lose yourself in someone's only one story. This podcast is for anyone who's ever felt alone in a room full of people, which is to say that this podcast is for everyone.
I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
We're the Ghost Story Guys.
And every 2 weeks, we explore first-person stories of encounters with the paranormal from all around the world.
Then we have some fun reacting to those stories. We like to say our goal is to scare the hell out of you, then make you laugh.
Belief in the paranormal is not required. All you need is a love of great storytelling and curiosity about the world around you.
Come find the Ghost Story Guys on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else fine podcasts live, or at ghoststoryguys.com.
And we're back. Plutarch, in his work Parallel Lives, mentions that it was Artemisia who recognized the body of Ariamenes. Now I forget. No, that's the difference. Sorry, the names look really similar. The captain of the Athenian ship was Amenius, but another person, Ariamenes. Apparently Artemisia recognized his body, I don't know, floating around. That's Xerxes' brother. And she brought the body back to Xerxes. So Plutarch wrote about this too, but I think this is all based on what Herodotus said. But maybe there's just, stories spread about. More details got added later. So after the battle, according to Polyaenus, Xerxes acknowledged Artemisia excelled above all the officers in the fleet, yes, and as a gift sent her a complete suit of Greek armor. Now I have to presume this was a unisex armor because there was not lady armor because women couldn't do stuff. But he also presented the captain of her ship, this is interesting, with a distaff and spindle. And I looked up what are those things, and those are used for spinning yarn. So was that a thing men did? Or was this like your captain's a lady, so here's some spinning stuff? I'm not sure, but nice. Some armor and some things for spinning. So according to Herodotus, after the defeat, Xerxes presented Artemisia with two possible courses of action. Like, they lost the battle. I don't want to underemphasize the fact that she did amazing, but they still lost. So he presented her with two options and asked her which one she preferred. So either he would lead troops. So he's just like, he didn't take her advice earlier, and now he's like, okay, didn't take her advice before. Here's the two options. Which do you think I should do? So either he would lead troops to the Peloponnese himself, or he would withdraw from Greece and leave his general Mardonius in charge. Artemisia suggested that he should retreat back to Asia Minor, and she advocated the plan suggested by Mardonius, who requested 300,000 Persian soldiers with which he would defeat the Greeks in Xerxes' absence. So here's a quote. Again, we know so little about her. Here's what she said, the advice she gave. I think you should retire and leave Mardonius behind with those whom he desires to have. If he succeeds, the honor will be yours because your slaves performed it. If on the other hand he fails, it would be no great matter, as you would be safe and no danger threatens anything that concerns your house. And while you will be safe, the Greeks will have to pass through many difficulties for their own existence. In addition, if Mardonius were to suffer a disaster, who would care? He is just your slave, and the Greeks will have but a poor triumph. As for yourself, you will be going home with the object for your campaign accomplished, for you have burned Athens. And Xerxes learned from his past mistake and listened to her. So he left Mardonius to conduct the war in Greece. And he sent Artemisia to Ephesus to take care of his illegitimate sons. Like, I guess that's an honor? I don't know. It's not like, you're a woman, please babysit my sons. It was something more important than that. Maybe, I don't know, but it was some sort of honor. Anyway, so opinions about Artemisia I of Caria, because that's the last we know of anything she did. We just know she was the queen, did this thing where she rammed the other ship. Xerxes thought she was great, and then she disappears from history entirely. So I wish that there's more to tell you about her, but what I can tell you about her is her legacy. So Herodotus, it speaks, I think it's a huge deal that Herodotus, a Greek man from the same time period as her, had a favorable opinion of her, even though, as I described, women in Greek culture were supposed to stay home and have babies. But Herodotus thought that she was great. He wrote about her, and because of him and his favorable opinion of her, we know about her. Even though she supported Persia, who by the time Herodotus was writing were the enemies of him. He praised her decisiveness and intelligence and emphasized her influence on Xerxes. On the other hand, so this is oldie time people writing about her. Thessalus, a son of Hippocrates, described Artemisia in a speech as a cowardly pirate. I love the emerging sudden end of season piracy theme we're having on Vulgar History, and spoiler, there is going to be another pirate story before the season ends. Anyway, so what Thessalus said, let's see. So I don't know. He just made up a story about, okay, here's what he said. Thessalus claimed the king of Persia demanded earth and water from the Coans in 493 BC, but they refused. So he gave the island to Artemisia to be wasted. Artemisia led a fleet of ships to the island of Kos to slaughter the Coans, but the gods intervened. The Greek gods, I guess. After Artemisia's ships were destroyed by lightning and she hallucinated visions of great heroes, she fled. However, she later conquered the island. So maybe that's a thing she did. 13 centuries later, a legend was quoted that claimed that Artemisia fell in love with a man from Abydos named Dardanus, and when he ignored her, she blinded him while he was sleeping, which I have to say, tits out behavior, but her love for him increased. An oracle told her to jump from the top of a rock, but she was killed after she jumped from the rock. So an oracle told her to jump, and then she jumped, but then died. but I don't think the oracle meant for her to kill herself. Those who leapt from this rock were said to be cured from the passion of love. According to legend, Sappho, the famous lesbian, literally killed herself by jumping from these cliffs because of someone who she was in unrequited love with. Anyway, I don't know. I have to say, it does not sound like Artemisia. Sounds like there's maybe a legend and they attach it to her name. I don't know. So, in Sparta, there was a monument that was very striking, and it was made of spoils taken in the Persian War. So this is like Greek people doing this. So over time, the Spartans altered it. So like they pillaged all this stuff and I guess just carved it and made it look cooler and better and more artistic. On the pillars were figures carved out of white marble, including a figure of Artemisia. So what is her legacy now? I mean, as me, not a person who knows a lot about the influence of the ancient world on the modern world, I tried to find what I could. So this is where I turned to the online magazine Persianesque. So a writer there, Parisa Sarange, writes that Pravin Etisami, an Iranian poet known for her debate poems, mentions Artemisia in her work and praises Artemisia's wit and skill in matters of warfare. This is a further quote from Parisa in Persianesque. Writes that Artemisia is not the only female warrior in Persian history. Artemisia is merely just one in a long line of ancient Persian women in power. Antea, for example, is a commander of the immortal guards of the Achaemenid dynasty. There are also many historical accounts from Roman and Greek periods referencing Iranian women warriors. In one account, Zonaras XII writes, amongst those who fell in the Persian army and were being stripped of their arms, there are said to have been found women also, dressed and armed like men, and that such women were also taken alive by the Romans. So, since the reign of two sisters who ruled Iran consecutively in the Sassanid era, the old Persian custom of having Persian women leaders and rulers has not been a consistent practice amongst Iran's myriad of rulers over the years. But the admiration for this particular lady admiral shows how Artemisia's inspiring life story has persevered and lived on, as it is still widely sought out, told, and retold today. End quote. So some ships have been named after her. I feel like what a better tribute than to name a ship after her. You don't want to, I don't know, just her famous thing was she rammed a ship into another ship and sank it. So like if you call a ship after her, that's like a badass ship. So in the 1960s, an Iranian destroyer was named for her, but it was since renamed after the 1979 Iranian Revolution. This was the largest ship in the Navy there. In Greece, she has an effect on, because of her involvement in Persian history, but also she was a Greek person, so people in Greece also remember her as a hero. So there's a novel called Creation by Gore Vidal, and in this depiction, it imagines that Artemisia had a long relationship with the Persian general Mardonius, who I mentioned a couple times. He's the one who was sent to ask what people thought they should do. And then he was the one who, at the end, she was like, you should leave Mardonius here to conquer people. So in this novel, it shows him acting as her consort in Halicarnassus, but she refused to marry him, determined to prove her independence. And then in the movie, the 2014 movie, 300 Rise of an Empire, Artemisia is featured, played by Eva Green. Love her. But they imagine this backstory for her in that movie that's like she was enslaved by the Greeks, like she was like a sex slave, and then I'm not sure how in this story then she's like this femme fatale and she becomes a naval commander, but she's the villain of the movie. I guess she has some badass fight scenes, which like worth it to see Eva Green in some badass fight scenes. But she's kind of like a sexy bad girl who like uses sexy things to try and win the battle. And it's funny to me that they were like, the only reason why a Greek woman would fight against the Greeks is if they were just like, why would a Greek woman fight against her own people? Like not the ramming the ship into the ship, but the fact that she was working with the Persians against the Greeks. And so they were like, well, the only reason was if she had some sort of like sex-based trauma in her background. And it's just like, people can be complex. Anyway, she also appears, Artemisia I of Caria, as a playable character in the mobile PC game Rise of Kingdoms. And so now it's time to score Artemisia of Caria, and it's challenging in the sense of we know so little about her, but based on the fact that we know anything about her, I think we can glean together some scores. So the first category is scandaliciousness. So, I mean, that's where usually, so things like the story about like, did she gouge out that guy's eyes when he didn't love her? I feel like that's like less likely to be actually true about her. And she was, I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a bit of like, Herman, my pills, when the Greek people understood that she was a woman and she was leading this naval battle, but that was the Greeks. That was their enemy, even though she was Greek. But to the Persians, like Xerxes thought she was great. Herodotus recorded her as this great person. There's other people who've talked about who, the way that they were recorded by the men who wrote about them, like Cleopatra or even like Rani Ditta, the men who wrote about them were kind of like, but she was kind of like a bit of a messy bitch who lived for drama. But Artemisia, I don't think was seen as scandalicious in her time by the people who mattered to her. That being said, the Greeks did put out a bounty for her for being a lady naval commander. So there's a bit of scandaliciousness, not super a lot. I'm going to give her like a 4 because there's definitely some there, but that was not what she was notable for. Scheminess, I think this is where she's going to score highly because the one thing we know about her is she did this scheme. Is she was out there leading the naval vessels. She knew that she was cornered and there was no way out unless she sank this other ship, which was conveniently perhaps being captained by a guy who she had beef with. So the fact that she did that she came up with this plan on the fly, whether or not she had secretly 2 sets of sails that she would interchange, the fact that Xerxes himself was like, oh, like, hell yeah. Like, her scheminess, I think, was significant. Like, the fact that whether or not she knew beforehand to warn him to not do the naval battle, whether or not it's true that she, later on, he sought out her counsel. Like, the thing we know she did was she rammed the ship into the other ship. And it was such a notable thing that not only Xerxes was excited about it, but Herodotus wrote about it. And honestly, we know so little about her, but she was so scheminess that Herodotus couldn't not write about it. And that, to me, in this context, is a 10. So her significance is another, this is a category that, I mean, honestly, all these categories are subjective and me and what mood am I in. But like the significance, sometimes I look at this and it's like, often I look at this and it's like, well, what's their significance to history? How did their life affect the course of events or whatever? And people like Isabella from Ferdinand and Isabella, like that's pretty major. She funded Christopher Columbus, and that we're still living with a legacy of that today. Artemisia of Caria was so long ago. She fought with Xerxes, who didn't manage to capture the Greek islands, and I don't think she was certainly not the reason why he failed in that. But where I think that she is significant is the fact that she's like the only woman who's mentioned in Herodotus's writings. Like she was so significant to him as a person from Halicarnassus. She was so significant to other writers of this period. Like her significance as a woman from this long ago who was mentioned at all when there are so many other women who I'm sure were doing other cool things and we don't know about them. Like, so as like a literary figure, like as a person who was written about, but also the fact that she was this warrior, she was significant enough to the Greeks that they had that 10,000 drachmas bounty on her head. And just because she's scoring not amazing in other categories, but also I think her significance just as like a woman from this part of the world who can be a heroine to all of us now. I'm giving her 10 for significance. And then the final category is the sexism bonus, which I don't like. If she had been like probably other Greek women at the time, like not allowed to do anything, not permitted to take on a leadership role like this, then she got a high sexism score. But the fact that she was a queen, that she ruled after her husband died in the name of her son, I assume. But then also the fact that she was entrusted and allowed to be a military commander, and she was so effective that the Greeks put this bounty on her head. Like, sexism does not seem to have held her back, except for maybe she would have been written about more had that not been a thing, but she was written about, you know? So I feel like the sexism is not that much in her way, which that's not, good for her or whatever, but it's just like, I think that wasn't a big stumbling block for her. She wasn't like locked up in a tower, etc. The sexism affected the way that she was written about later, like that story about her throwing herself off the rocks and stuff. But like, it's low score for sexism. I'm going to say a 3. So this is going to be easy to add up. This is 27, which honestly is just like so much the average score. This is a score like people who just score high in some, low in some, in between in some others. Here's what I like to see though. I'm always curious to see who gets the same score as other people. So she's got a 27. The other pirate adjacent one we've talked about, Saida Al-Hura, also is a 27. The other pirate adjacent woman, Sarah Kidd, also a 27. It's also the same score as Ana de Mendoza, who's not a pirate but wore an eye patch. So, and honestly, after what I just said about Isabel of Castile was so significant, she also got a 27. Honestly, this is so many people. It's really a great grouping of people. It's 27. Jeanne de la Motte has a 27. It's a great score. She's in good company here. Oh, and then there's also the Lady Jane Seymour Memorial Award for Outstanding Supporting Performance. We know so little about her life. I hope she had like some good friends. Xerxes like kind of had her back a little bit, but not at all to the level that I would ever give him that award. So that's Artemisia I of Caria. And because this episode is coming out when it's coming out, which is like towards the end of November, you'll be listening to this at the beginning of December. I wanted to just mention some things because this is a time of year when lots of people are buying presents for other people. So first off, if you're like, I want to get some of that merch, I want to, if you're a fan of Vulgar History and you want to just give somebody a Vulgar History gift and they don't know what it's about, but it'll make you smile. But also if you're buying a gift for somebody who is a fan of Vulgar History, I do have a merch store. It is at vulgarhistory.store. And when you're on that store, you can always use promo code TITSOUT for free US shipping or TITSOUT10 for 10% off. And along with all the usual merch that's there are some special holiday items. I had them last year and I've brought them back because they make me smile. There's mugs and t-shirts and things, stickers with the holiday slogans for Vulgar History, which are Tits the Season, Tits Out for the Holidays, and then a special Hanukkah themed one that has a picture of a menorah, and then it says Candelicious. So that's all there in the store. Those are going to be all available basically until Christmas. So if you want to get those things, but if you're going to buy some stuff and you want it to arrive by Christmas, if that's the holiday you celebrate, I recommend ordering by the beginning of December to ensure your stuff arrives on time. And then also, I mentioned this last time, but I do want to let you know that this is a thing I'm happy to do. So if you want as a gift to give to somebody an audio recording of me saying, Happy Hanukkah or Merry Christmas or Tits Out, or just like having a little, saying something, I don't know, like 30 seconds of whatever. You can contact me about that. I'm happy to do it. It's like Cameo, except just my voice. And I do it myself, not through Cameo, because I'm not that famous. Anyway, you can use the contact form at vulgarhistory.com to get in touch with me if that is something you want to know more about. You can also contact me where I'm on social media, but also follow me on social media. So I'm on Instagram at vulgarhistorypod. And then also I'm now on TikTok at Vulgar History, where I'm still figuring things out, but having a nice time so far. And it's been nice to connect with some Tits Out Brigade members there as well. Oh, also in terms of holiday gift giving. So I mentioned so many books in this podcast, and I keep lists of them on bookshop.org. And I put together a list of like recommended reads or like a gift guide or whatever, like books that are actively in print that I think would be good to get. Well, that I think that any history fan would enjoy, but especially fans of Vulgar History. So anyway, I put a link to that in the show notes. It's at bookshop.org/shop/vulgarhistory. And if you click through that link that's in the show notes or buy things from that shop, then a little bit of money goes to support this podcast as well, which is like a little Christmas present for me. And then, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/AnnFosterWriter. So that's where for $1 or more a month, you get early access to new episodes, as well as you get ad-free episodes. And then if you pledge at least $5 or more a month, then you get access to the spin-off podcasts. So that's So This Asshole, where I talk about men from history. Some mostly terrible men. Some of them are surprisingly okay. Like Alexander the Great, not the worst. And then also there's Vulgar Peace Theater, where I'm joined by Allison Epstein and Lana Johnson, and we talk about costume dramas for like these episodes I do, like the three of us do. They're like 3 hours long. Like we get into it. Each episode, I think without fail, is in fact longer than the movie being discussed. So if you just want to hear us just chatting, that's where you can find that. Anyway, and then again, I've put links in the show notes to some organizations that you can read up on, and if you want to find ways to support the protests in Iran. And until next time, keep your pants on and your tits out. Vulgar History is hosted, written, and researched by Anne Foster and edited by Christina Lumagi.
Welcome to the small town of Chinook, where faith runs deep and secrets run deeper. In this new thriller, religion and crime collide when a gruesome murder rocks the isolated Montana community. Everyone is quick to point their fingers at a drug-addicted teenager, but local deputy Ruth Vogel isn't convinced. She suspects connections to a powerful religious group. Enter federal agent V.B. Laureau, who has been investigating a local church for possible criminal activity. The pair form an unlikely partnership to catch the killer, unearthing secrets that leave Ruth torn between her duty to the law, her religious convictions, and her very own family. But something more sinister than murder is afoot, and someone is watching Ruth. Chinook, starring Kelly Marie Tran and Sanaa Lathan. Listen to Chinook wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Rob Benedict.
And I am Richard Spate. We were both on a little show you might know called Supernatural.
It had a pretty good run, 15 seasons, 327 episodes.
And though we have seen, of course, every episode many times, we figured, hey, now that we're wrapped, let's watch it all again.
And we can't do that alone, so we're inviting the cast and crew that made the show along for the ride. We've got writers, producers, composers, directors, and we'll of course have some actors on as well, including some certain guys that played some certain pretty iconic brothers.
It was kind of a little bit of a left field choice in the best way possible.
The note from Kripke was, he's great, we love him, but we're looking for like a really intelligent Duchovny type.
With 15 seasons to explore, it's going to be the road trip of several lifetimes. So please join us and subscribe to Supernatural then and now.